Hello, I'm Toycat, and if Google Maps doesn't know where something is, it'll often point you right here. This is a place known as Null Island, and it's where you get redirected if something doesn't have coordinates, because this is 0 degrees east and 0 degrees north, also known as the center of the world. Saying the center of the world is a little weird because obviously the world is actually a globe, just like how this raccoon's center would be inside of his belly. The inside of the globe would be, the center of the globe would be the inside molten core, and no one wants to go there. However, the center of the Earth's surface, or the center of the raccoon's surface area, could be a point that you would locate if you could say a north-south point, which we very easily can, that's the equator, and if you could say an east-west point, which we definitely can. We've divided the world into two, and we did so precisely in London, which means if you live in London, walking 5 miles east will take you to the eastern hemisphere, and walking 5 miles west will take me to the western hemisphere. It's crazy how fast that can happen, but where these two lines intersect is known as 0, 0, because it's 0 degrees east and 0 degrees north off the exact center of the planet. And so from here, you can work out how far north or south something is by measuring how many degrees north or south you go along the Earth's face. And as you can see right here, the northernmost point that exists is the North Pole, and the southernmost point that exists are the South Pole at 90 degrees north and minus 90 degrees south, or just 90 degrees south if you want to. This is a really interesting way to measure the planet, because you can look and you can see where the most northernmost things are, and obviously the North Pole is not a very exciting northmost thing, so the northmost country, or the northmost country of a capital, would be Iceland. Reykjavik is the furthest north capital. It's at about 64 degrees north, and this video is really easily answered. What are the northernmost capitals in the world? It's Reykjavik, shortly followed by Helsinki, and then it's Oslo, and then you might think it's Sweden, because we've got all the Scandinavian countries, or the Nordic countries at least, but it's actually Tallinn, Estonia, and then Stockholm is just after it. These are very, very close in latitude, you can see right here, but Tallinn is at about 59, and Stockholm is at about 50. Wow, they're both 59. But Tallinn is very slightly hot. Actually, let's prove it. So here is Tallinn at 59.4, and here is Stockholm at 59.33. And so as a result, these are the 5 most north capitals. But when you try to do south, things get a bit more interesting, because the world, not only in terms of like culture, not only in terms of population, but also in terms of land area, is very north heavy. There are lots of things in the north of the northern hemisphere, but in the southern hemisphere, it gets really disappointing really quickly. Like the southernmost countries, you might say, are like Argentina or Chile, but their capitals are very north because most of their population is up there. And so the southernmost capital for a country that is internationally recognized is New Zealand. Wellington, New Zealand is found right over here, and in comparison to Iceland's 64, as you can see, Wellington is at minus 41. That is really, really high up. It's not very far down. Minus 90 would be the South Pole. Well, let's just prove it to you. There's minus 84. If I could get to the South Pole, you could see it's minus 90, which means that actually New Zealand isn't even half of the way down the southern hemisphere. You can see that's the equator and that's New Zealand, and to put this in perspective of how close New Zealand is to the equator, for the furthest south country capital, the equivalent, so again, minus 41 was New Zealand's capital, the equivalent, if you look around countries you might know, everyone knows Kyrgyzstan, right? Uzbekistan's capital is Tashkent. So Tashkent is found at about the same coordinates, but north, 41 degrees. Or if you want a more recognizable example, because you're not big on your Uzbek geography, Madrid is just a little further south than, or rather, yeah, a little further south than New Zealand is south, whatever. You get the point. It's at 40 degrees north versus New Zealand's minus 41 south. New Zealand is only about as south as Spain is north. That is the real, shocker fact right here, because the southern hemisphere really doesn't have much going on. And if you want to make this question more interesting, because after New Zealand it gets really depressing, you have to be like, well, there's there's Canberra, and then you got to be like, well, there's Cape Town is one of the capitals of South Africa, and if you count just one of the capitals, you can be like, ooh, minus 33, and you start to realize the southern hemisphere is so underutilized. So the distance from Cape Town, which is pretty far south, it's the southest capital in Africa, in fact. If you look at Cape Town to the equator, it's 3,700 kilometers. If you look at Cape Town to the southern hemisphere, I think we have to show the world as a globe for this. If you look at Cape Town to the South Pole, you realize that it's about 6,000. There is double the distance from the equator to South Africa, the southernmost capital, than there is from South Africa to Antarctica, which is a big waste for a lot of reasons, honestly. We just need more land in this big void of nothingness. But if you are to include, if you want to like get a more exciting answer, you have to be like, well, what's a more, what's the definition of country? Why do we have to say internationally recognized, Toy Cat? Can't we go with like not countries? And I'm glad you asked. That's my favorite thing to do. So if you are to include non-country countries, i.e. like they're sort of countries but not, one of the furthest south capitals would be the capital of the Falkland Islands, which is Stanley. The Falkland Islands are owned by a country that is who knows who owns the Falkland Islands. Let's not get controversial here, but they have a capital. That's what's worth mentioning. And Stanley is the capital of that. The capital of the Falkland Islands is found at, so here's how you find out. You click a random point on Google Maps. It tells you where you are, minus 51 degrees. That's a whole 10 degrees souther than New Zealand's capital is. And wow, if you actually look at that, we're now over half of the way to the, to the southern pole. From, if you wanted to go from, because of that fact, by being close to the South Pole, the fastest way from Port Stanley to, say, Australia would be like that. You would fly over the South Pole to get there. That would be really cool. In the same way that because, if you think about it, if Spain is about half the way up the northern hemisphere, London is at minus, I don't know the degrees actually, it's at 51 degrees north, which means the fastest way from London, which is at 51 degrees, to Ottawa, which is at 45 degrees, would be, let's test this one right here, would be just over, roughly over the northern hemisphere. Let's go from Helsinki. There we go. From Helsinki to Ottawa, you go very close to the North Pole. Isn't that fun? From Moscow, I bet you go even closer. And so, yeah, basically, I think that's the cool thing when you get to go over the poles. And so if we tried to pick more capitals, just getting really kind of messy here, then you could go to South Georgia and the Sandwich Islands. And these islands it's a fun set, are these even a place, right? The more you dive into it, it's like, it's a remote and inhospitable collection of islands known as the South Georgia and Sandwich Islands. Like, literally known as inhospitable. When you put that in the first few descriptions, it's not going to go well. But these places, you could make an argument they have a capital. They don't really have a population. They just have an area and a time zone, and they drive on the left. If you were to drive there, there'd be a place to drive. But yeah, basically, as a result, there is... you could argue if they had a capital, it would be their one city. And so where is that found at? Ooh, minus 54 degrees? Yeah, and if you really wanted to argue, well, Antarctica should be an independent place. Because, I think it's messed up that so many countries claim Antarctica, even though we all agree there shouldn't be borders in Antarctica. Even Google Maps try and find the borders in Antarctica. And so Antarctica's de facto capital, because I believe in self-governance, I think it's messed up colonialism that we're going in there and taking their stuff. McMurdo Station is like the biggest populated area. And as, Europeans know, the most populated place is often what we call the capital. Here, blue countries are the country where the largest city is also the capital. Orange countries are where that's not true. So if you're Chinese or American or Brazilian watching this, maybe you're confused by this as an idea, but everyone else agrees that probably McMurdo Station, right? That's a pretty good place to pick as a capital. And so how south would that capital be? Minus 77, which would make it the southernmost capital in the world and the furthest capital away from the equator. But then if we're arguing that, you should say, well, Greenland should be independent. They're all, it's a very different place to Denmark, who currently own it. And so Greenland's capital of Nuuk is found at 64 degrees north, still not as far south as Antarctica's would be. Although, I'd make an argument that, some of these cities or some of the settlements, calling anything in Greenland a city is a real stretch. Even like Nuuk, right? Have you ever looked at the... So the largest city is Nuuk, the capital. And if you ever look at the roads, it's like you can't try and take a car anywhere outside the capital. Try and steal a car and drive it away from. There's only so many roads around here. So yeah, there's a fun fact. That's one I find interesting. But yeah, basically, as a result of this being a territory by itself, this is actually the furthest north capital in the world. Although, for my purposes, we could take their most northernmost city, say that they want to reclaim that title of furthest away from the equator. Still only 74 degrees. Oh, actually, wait, what about Kalakasauk? As you can see, no one lives there, but still 74 degrees. I lied. There's Stephen Palace du Chris, and then there is a K&I shopping center, and then there's 2 roads and a school. Wow, I can't imagine what life is like there. Obviously you can see Greenland so good, so happy, so maybe it's good up in Kalakasauk. But yeah, that is a fun fact that the only way, you know, all the landmass in the southern hemisphere that is anywhere close to the South Pole is this big place we call Antarctica, and it's so big and so inhospitable, we don't even, no one's even tried claiming an actual country there. We just have research stations, whereas the North Pole is owned by Greenland. I mean, it's closest to Greenland. I don't think anyone owns the North Pole, but whereas the North Pole is just about settled by about 12 people because humans like to live close to the equator, and that's the real reason, you know, like, this video is fun. It's like diving into the most northernmost capitals. Wow, isn't Reykjavik interesting? Ooh, it's so northernmost. It's so northernmost that in the peak of winter, their sun rises at this time and sets at that time. I've been there very close to it, and it's very depressing how little sun you get, to some people. But then you could say, well, actually, what about Longyearbyen? What about them? They're the capital of Svalbard, and if you're advocating all these random independence movements, then they're at 78 degrees north, a real city that you can visit. There's no visas required. Functionally, you have to go via Norway, but there's no visas required to Svalbard, is at 78 degrees, which when you compare it to McMurdo, I actually forgot, it's at 77, therefore the furthest capital away from the equator, even in the event of Antarctic independence, is found all the way up here. And it's just a reminder of how ridiculous of a place Svalbard is. It's a reminder that maybe it shouldn't be a place. And so this is why I'm advocating in this video. Today's video sponsor is Nuke Svalbard. There is just too many issues that come from this land. There's the Russian mining colony. There's all the people that go to Longyearbyen and get trapped, and then they have to, you know, eaten by polar bears. All of that could be avoided if we drop one tactical nuke right here. I mean, it's so far away from everything, we probably wouldn't even feel the fallout. And so if you want to also advocate nuking Svalbard, just remember to drop a like on this video. Remember to dislike this video if you don't want to nuke Svalbard. And I've reached a deal with the Norwegian government. Based on the likes and dislike counter, we're going to actually see whether we should nuke the country out of existence or not. So I'm really advocating for those thumbs up, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. I don't know if I can make any of those jokes, so I guess I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye. Oh man, that's a weird second channel video. Have I overstepped the bounds by saying, you know, anyway, second channel, don't care. Oh, give me money if you would like me to buy another suit. I've been wearing this one for years. Doesn't, you know, I won't spend your money on the editors for this channel. That comes out for separate fund, don't worry. Your money on Patreon will go straight to kebabs, weird drinks, and raccoons. Anyway, yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I don't want to see you ever again.